Hi everyone, it's that time again to have the next chapter of Mr. Penguin and the Fortress of Secrets. And we are up to chapter 22, which is called Time for Dinner. Now, mused Dr. Mazzaro, what am I going to do with you both? Tonight is the night that I take over the world, and I cannot have my great project interrupted. She glanced over to Mr. Penguin and Colin. Only their eyes peeked out between the coils of the snakes holding them. I could hypnotize you, she continued, but I need to reserve my power for the hypnotron. She thought for a moment before nodding. Yes. There's nothing else for it, she said. I'll feed you to the snakes. They'll gobble you up immediately. Mr. Penguin squeaked from inside his snake prison. Colin squeezed two of his legs out to hold up his pad. It said, "No, thank you." Dr. Mazzaro ignored him and clicked her fingers at the snakes. "Take them next door," she commanded. Mr. Penguin and Colin found themselves being bumped along the ground back towards the Hall of Snakes. Then they heard a "Wait!" Mr. Penguin peeked out and saw Dr. Mazzaro standing in the middle of the room with a fizzing lamp shining direct on her like a spotlight. "This is my big night," she whispered, talking to herself now. "And I always did perform best in front of a crowd. It would be a shame not to have any audience for the great finale of my plan." She turned to Mr. Penguin and Colin and grinned a toothy grin. Colin held his notepad towards Mr. Penguin. It said, "Yikes!" And Mr. Penguin had to agree. "You'll soon see just how powerful I am. Afterwards, you'll make a nice midnight snack for the snakes. It will be a fulfilling evening for both them and me." She clicked her fingers again and turned towards the hidden door. The two snakes followed, dragging Mr. Penguin and Colin along the floor. "This isn't going to do my nice adventurer's hat any good at all," tutted Mr. Penguin, "and I bet my satchel is getting ever so scuffed." They travelled down a cold and cobwebby tunnel behind Dr. Mazzaro's clip-clopping heels. The drip, drip, drip of icy water from the ceiling was joined by a great thundering noise that grew louder and louder. They reached a fireplace at the end of the secret tunnel. Mr. Penguin was worrying that he might be pulled up through the chimney when the fireplace swung around like a revolving hotel lobby door. It opened out into a large chamber with a polished stone floor and a high domed ceiling. The thundering noise was deafeningly loud now, and Mr. Penguin and Colin could see what was causing it. If Mr. Penguin had been a goose, it would have made him go pimply all over. All around the edge of the chamber were hundreds of hamster cages stacked one on top of another, forming a strange sort of wall around the room. They were all filled with rodents going like the clappers in their exercise wheels, making the groaning noise that shook the room. But while their little legs were scampering, their eyes were blank and swirling. They'd been hypnotized. Mr. Penguin's eyes swiveled around to look for Gordon. Where was he? Aha! There! He was the only creature not running at high speed. Still in his hamster costume, he took a few steps on his wheel, then flew around it on his bottom before falling out onto the sawdust in his cage. Then he picked himself up and did it all over again. He seemed to be thoroughly enjoying himself and was completely unaware that he was in absolute danger. Mr. Penguin saw that all the cages were connected by a thick black cable that ran across the floor to a giant humming box. From that, a gigantic cable wider than Mr. Penguin's entire head wiggled across the floor and plugged into a monstrous machine in the middle of the chamber. It gleamed in a strange green-yellow light and pointed straight up at the domed roof. The doctor grinned a wide, wolfish grin. "Behold!" she cried over the rumbling noise. "The Hypnotron!" And that's where we're going to leave the story for now.